Chyana, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I just finished reading your book. First of all, Chyana, you are an author, a poet, and your book just came out, Soft as Bones.
Mm-hmm.
And I just finished reading it yesterday morning. And I didn't want it to end, but I did want it to end. But I didn't want it to end because your writing penetrated my soul, my brain so much. And you're such a beautiful, descriptive writer that when I read good books, I don't want them to end. And so that's how I felt. So I finished it, tears in my eyes. And I went back to the beginning. I go back when I finish a book and I read the first few pages again. I don't know why I do this. Specifically with your book, I wanted to go back to the beginning. And I went back to the beginning. And in the first page is a quote from Ocean Vuong, a prolific writer as well. And I just wanted to read this, if that's okay. Some people say history moves in a spiral, not the line we have come to expect. We travel through time in a circular trajectory, our distance increasing from an epicenter only to return again, one circle removed. What does that mean to you in context that you put it in the first page of your book? What does that mean for you, that quote?
Yeah, so that quote, it kind of came to me in like a perfect moment. So I always say that I'm a weird writer in the sense that like I'm not very well read. Like growing up, I read like smut and romantasy and like things like that. And it wasn't really until university that I started reading more like classical literature and things like that. And so probably when I was about 75% done writing the book, the bulk of it, it was the second year of my MFA at Columbia, and we read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which is where that quote is from. And pretty much right in the very beginning, I was reading and I read that, and I read it over and over again because at the time when that came to me was a time in the memoir when I was thinking so heavily about structure and how to braid and weave it all together. And of course, like, when you read the memoir, you can see I'm very much talking about lineages. I'm talking about generations. I'm talking about what we inherit, the stories and the histories along with the darker things too. And when I read that quote, I was like, yes, like this is somebody who understands what I'm trying to do, because when I was thinking about the structure, I was thinking about this core event that happened that affected my family, right? Like the abuse that my father committed in our household. And I was thinking about that as like the core event. And then I was like, I took a magnifying glass and I was like tracing back from that moment all of our lives to try to understand how something this horrific could happen. And it was moving in a spiral because it was, okay, starting with me and what happened, my relationship with my father, and then exploring my mom's story, like how did she meet my father? How did she fall in love with this man? And then thinking about her experiences and doing that same thing with my father, and then going back further into my grandparents, and then even reaching back further with some of the oral traditions that I bring forward, like the origin story of the round dance, for example. Like that's that's an ancient teaching, ancient oral tradition that we have. And, then Wheatago and all of these things. So I was doing that. I was moving. And every time I moved to a different layer of that spiral, that history, I was coming to understand my life and my experiences and my father and all of our experiences in a much more full and kind of complete way. And that's why when I found that quote, I was like, this has to be the quote at the beginning of my book, because it's going to give the readers the clue and the tool to how to then read the book, and that little first indicator for what I'm doing with structure and form.
100%. And when I went back after finishing your book and read that, of course, it like clicked immediately. Because sometimes when we start books, you start and you're like, okay, cool. I don't know what this means yet. I see, okay, I've heard this theory before. It's Buddhist-esque, and I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. But then when I read it and finished and went back, it just resounded so much. And then it all clicked with your story. And the way you just said, braiding, weaving, that is why I love it. And I think so many of us, Indigenous people, will relate to your story and love reading it because you do have your Cree mythos in addition to your personal story that intertwines, but then it's coinciding with you as a person healing and coming to terms with, this tragic, monstrous thing that happened to you. And, it's almost like it's like a hero's journey almost in a way, that you've lived such a life for being so young. And I think for our people, I love that you were so vulnerable because, like my mom, and you mentioned this too, and I, the part with your mom being so lonely and a lot of our moms and our grandmas so lonely, right? My mom was in boarding school. Her mom was in boarding school. Drugs and alcohol, addiction, right? Riddles us all.
Yeah.
No one is exempt in the Native community that I know.
No.
And if you are, bless you, you've made it out to the other side.
Yeah.
But the part with your mother saying that she is so lonely, and because she didn't have that mom figure, and I just related so much, and I think our people can find this similar story, but you've written it, you've said it, and the vulnerability of how open you were about your drug use. I mean, just even sexual abuse, for a lot of times we don't talk about those things, right? We keep them under the rug, and that's in a lot of families just in general, Indigenous or not. We don't talk about uncle who
exactly.
So we protect those people, and why, because it is painful and it's hurtful, and this book is such an important read, not just for Indigenous people, for all people, but because you are destigmatizing, talking about drug use, sexual, physical, mental abuse, promiscuity, losing ourselves in in our voyage, but also trying to numb the pain of what, you've been through.
That's the part, the numbing, right? That's why it was so important to talk about all of this stuff.
Yes, because, I grew up, I was saying, I had written some notes in here, and I was saying two of my favorite things, I love Native youth culture. I love youth culture and drug dealer aesthetic and danger. And I think when I read this, I realized that it was because it was part of my voyage too, as a kid, right?
Yeah.
We have this like sense of danger, and we're going out, and there's like cute boys and there's cute people, and we're, I was inspired by youth culture. And so I immediately fell into your book and absolutely loved it. But I love how you started telling your story, and you tell it of kind of like this happy family. Like we kind of know something's going on with the dad, but you also painted these really beautiful pictures of him, and with the Christmas morning, and that bannock, that recipe sounds bussin', and I'm like, we don't do that good in Oklahoma, and I'm like, do I need to put some onions up in the fry bread?
Yeah, you do.
Because I was like, oh, okay, hold that. So you started it, which I love that too, right? Because we kind of know something's up, but then you also have these beautiful words for this person who is hurt you and your family. I also was having, after I read your book, was having a hard time. How do I ask you questions about something I read that is like so personal, and you were so vulnerable with it. I was in Woodstock yesterday cutting a client, and she's an instructor or a professor at Yale, and she's an artist, so our superpowers are with our hands, right?
Yeah.
Mine is doing hair, touching people, creating sculptures or sculpting hair with my hands. And her and I was telling her about your book when I was sculpting her hair, razoring her hair. And she was like, yeah, I don't know how to ask a question. And I'm like, me neither. And I'm going to go with this amazing, prolific writer, and I'm going to try to ask her about this book. And I can only just amplify you. So I'm sorry if I'm just so freshman in my detailing of your book, because it is so special, and the way you wrote about it, it warrants so much more. So I really thank you for allowing me to talk to you about it.
Of course.
But because we have a shared similar upbringing, I think it is important for, everyone to understand anyone can talk to anyone, like you said, you weren't well read. I am not well read. I'm like street slang, gay slang.
Yeah.
Like I'm like girl, boots down the house, you know? And I know that you get that too because of I read your book.
Yeah.
And that's what I love too, is like we have our foot in a place that we've known darkness, we've seen poverty, we've been in poverty, but then you've come to New York and you're at Columbia University, and you were an adjunct professor, correct?
Yeah.
And when did you graduate from Columbia?
I graduated from Columbia in May of 2023, so 2 years ago. And so I actually was the first person in a couple things. So I was the first ever Indigenous graduate from the creative nonfiction program at Columbia, which is so crazy.
Crazy.
So wild.
All the firsts.
Yeah, all the firsts. But then, I was also the first person of my cohort to sell my book, because that's all of our dreams in the MFA. We go there, we're writing the book. That's what we all want. And I remember I got my agent after the first year, and then we sold the book, I think, in like April of 2023. So before graduation even.
Wow. And it started as an essay, or how did it begin? Now, I know it began because you've been writing your whole life, right? Like I read, your letters when you were younger, and even then, like I wanted to make note of that even though there was a lot of drug, sex, and alcohol, you also at the same time were writing.
Yes. And
do you feel like that writing saved you in a type of way, like pen to paper?
God. Yes. Yes. Some of my earliest memories are of writing, right? Like when I was in the acreage, right? You talk about the beginning of the book, and the way that I chose to set the scene in family, like to build up the family so the people could read and see what we are at the core of it, right? Just a family, and these moments of just being free and wild on the acreage and the trees and the pond and just outside 24/7. And some of my earliest memories are there. And my dad built me this flower garden with these massive boulders, these big rocks, and then we filled it with dirt, and I planted these wildflowers. And one of my earliest memories is like sitting upon one of those big rocks, like this small little girl, and writing this song. And I would write songs about nature and the trees and like the clouds drifting on by. And
love.
So those are some of my earliest memories, and writing really has just kind of stuck with me throughout my life. It became like this refuge for me, because you talked about sweeping things under the rug, right? And for so much of my life I was forced to keep these secrets, and I saw things that you shouldn't have to see as a young girl, and I couldn't tell people that my dad was a drug dealer. I couldn't talk about what he did for work. Like I also had to carry the secret of him being in love with my sister and the things that I saw between them, like horrific things. And so writing was this thing that I would do like late at night by myself in my bedroom, and I would just have my journal and I would just be sitting and writing, and I'd be writing these poems, and I would write these little like mini letters, and then after he was out of my life, I would write I could probably write a book of like these letters that I had written to my father that I never sent. And it was just this way of releasing, and it was kind of this sacred space where I could just be open and I could like unveil my secrets to and unburden my soul. And writing kind of continued to be that for me. Like there were definitely moments in my life when writing became further away from me. And those are the moments when I was furthest away from myself, because, we talked about a little bit about like the drug use, the drinking, and, numbing myself, and the moments of that excessive partying, I wasn't really writing. But I would take a break, and I wasn't like, there would be some bits where I would, but it was not regular and not consistent the way that it normally is. And it was like, as soon as I would make those decisions to be like, holy fuck, what am I doing? Because I had a lot of those moments where you get a little bit deeper, then you're like, okay, I'm fucked up all the time. I need to like give my head a shake and boom, get the hell out of it.
And you're lucky that you can do that.
Yeah.
Because not everyone that has addictive personalities can get themselves back out.
That's right.
And, I was wondering if it was the writing that kind of helped alleviate some of the burden. But yeah, like that's, we're so lucky that you were able to kind of pull yourself out of that.
Yeah.
And so take me back. You were at university in Alberta. And then when you were applying, how many other schools did you applied for? A lot of different schools, right?
Yeah, for my MFA.
For MFA.
Yes.
Okay, and mind you, I'm a hairstylist.
Yeah.
So BFA, MFA. I know the MFA is the major one. Okay. So the masters.
Yeah, master in fine arts.
So you got your BFA in Alberta.
I actually got my BA in Alberta, so Bachelor of Arts. So English was my major, and then I did a creative writing minor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then you applied to many schools.
Yes.
In America and Canada.
Yeah. So that was a process and a journey. So COVID was actually, I was one of those people where it was a blessing for me, because when I was in my undergrad, I always knew that I wanted to be like a university professor and to teach in some capacity. But when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I actually remember feeling like I'm not smart enough for this, because I was taking these English classes as part of the core curriculum that I hated, like medieval literature. I'm like, I hated this. I don't understand this, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until I took this, it was this fiction class where it was trauma studies within fiction. And
I have a note of that.
Yes.
That's in your book. Because that was the first time you heard
the word intergenerational trauma. Yes, because this was back in 2015. So times were very different.
Oh, yeah. We're not
very different.
We were not talking in our communities about like we are now.
No.
I'm constantly, I'm this way because of, intergenerational trauma. So was your mind blown when you read that? Were you like, wait, this explains so much.
Yes, absolutely. That was one of those like key pivotal moments. Sometimes I like to look at my life. I don't know if you remember those games as a child where you connect the dots and then it makes a picture in the end.
Yeah.
I kind of think of my life like that sometimes. And so like, okay, here's the picture now, but there are these core moments, right, that really have shaped what it is now. And
the bigger circle.
Exactly.
The bigger circle. All the other ones,
yeah,
right?
That was one of the bigger circles. And part of that class, yes, we were reading fiction that, with traumatic events that were a part of it, but we were also reading trauma theory. And so that's when I read Dory Laub's essay. It was talking about intergenerational trauma in relation to the Holocaust, because that was, I think he coined that term.
Yes.
At the time. But when I was reading it, I was just like, holy shit, this is what we are experiencing, like as Indigenous people, this huge collective trauma that like swept across our land with the residential schools and the 60s scoop. So there was these two really kind of poignant movements that happened like 100 years apart, essentially. So all of those different things. But it was an amazing experience, that class, because it was giving me the vocabulary to understand my life and some of my experiences, that was allowing me to also look at my life and my family and the trauma and what happened with like a lens of compassion and a little bit more understanding.
Right.
Whereas like, you know, for many years I carried an anger and a hatred and like fuck this, how could this happen, like so angry. And so that was one of those key moments that really helped me like just let go of a lot of that anger and have compassion and understanding. But that in that class, I remember I got an A plus and like 4.0. All the other classes I was getting like B minuses, C plus.
Are these like other journalism classes or writing or?
No, all of my writing classes.
Called? What is the school called in Columbia that you went to? Like, I know there's different, like, is it creative writing? Is it writing journalism?
So it's the School of the Arts that I went to at Columbia. School of the Arts. But this was still back at the University of Alberta. And so...
Oh, so the University of Alberta is when you first heard of the trip?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because that was a long time ago. Got you.
Long time ago. But, you know, kind of how Columbia then came to be, and because, like I said, I didn't think I was smart enough to go and be an English professor. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get accepted to, like, a master's program. So I was like, let me just apply to an after degree in education and go and be a high school English teacher, and then I'll continue writing on the side and like write my books. And so I was accepted to the program at the University of Alberta. Boom, COVID hits. I'm forced with a choice because I'm not the kind of person who learns very well online. I really need that FaceTime in the class. I think most of us do, right?
Visual learners. I am the same way. Like, I can't listen to audiobooks, like podcasts, any day.
Yeah.
But with books, I don't know what it is I love. Like, and I love marking them, and I love, like, feeling them. I used to be so precious with books. But now I it's this relation I have with my hands, and I don't know, I just love it, especially paperbacks.
Yes.
You know, you can really, like, hold it and love it. So
I don't like a hardcover.
I know. I like the beauty of it, their art, and it's like hard, and you know, it's pretty on the bookshelf.
Yeah.
But every day, like having
holding it.
It's such a fun, like, yes. Okay, so pandemic, you're in Alberta, and you're applying, and you get accepted into Columbia.
So no. So here's what happened. So boom, COVID hits, and at the time, this lovely man that I was dating, Justin, I ended up moving with him to London, Ontario during the pandemic, because when that happened, I was like, let me take a year off, and because I don't want to go and study distance at this after degree in education. So he got a job as a professor over at Western. So I was like, well, sure, I'll move with you. Why not? Like, what else are we doing here? You know, like, I'll come along for the ride and the journey. And he's not in the book, but he was, and he's in the acknowledgements, and he was such a key person for me in terms of healing and having this really beautiful, healthy relationship after I had remained single for a long time, trying to process all of those unhealthy relationships that I had in my younger years. But so there I found myself in London, Ontario, and he let me turn the second bedroom into my office. And so that was my writing space. And so all of a sudden I had the time, you know, we're all collecting CERB at that time. So and no distractions, no friends, no family, no nothing. And I just sat in that room and I wrote, and that's when the essay was born, Soar. And so during that time too, that's when I was like, hold up a minute. I was like, I'm sure I would have been a great high school teacher and that would have been lovely, but I'm like, that's actually not what I want. Like, I do love teaching in higher education. And at this time, this is when I started looking into MFA programs, because Teresa Marie Mayote's Heartberries is like my favorite memoir of all time. And I was reading her bio in the back, and it said, oh, like, she took an MFA at the Institute of American and Indian Arts.
Yes.
And so that's when I was like, okay, well, what is this? And then I got curious about this, and I was like, this is what I want to do, because I want to take these 2 years and really hone in on this book and on this story and live and breathe it every day for these years. And so I was so scared I wasn't going to get into any program. So I applied to UBC, and then I applied to the Institute of American Indian Arts, but both of those were like distant learning programs.
Okay.
Because I wasn't sure if I wanted to move. Like I was still, in love and in this relationship. But then it was interesting because the more I started writing, the less I was in love with my relationship. And I think it's because like this book and this story was like the only thing I had space for in my heart at the time. And I needed more time to be alone. That's what I wanted to be alone with my baby, my book. Like that's all I
want. You're nurturing it, you're feeding it, right?
Yes, exactly. And then when I really started to think about it, I was like, I don't want to do a distance program. I'm like, I took a year off because I didn't want to study over Zoom and whatever. And then that's when I Googled best MFA programs in the world. Because I was like, fuck it, like, let me like
Literally,
shoot my shot. Like, fuck it, let me shoot my shot and see what's up. And years and years and years before that, I was actually looking at the Columbia Master's program for English. But I was like, there's no way I'm going to get into that, blah, blah, blah. And then the MFA time rolled around, and Columbia MFA was one of the best programs, is one of the best programs that you can take. And then so I was like, well, fuck it. Let me just apply to it and see what happens. And then I kind of got in love with the idea of being in New York and studying in New York. And, it's like a literary capital of the world. It's a really like amazing place where so much happens in that world.
And so much inspiration comes from the streets of New York too, and authors that have written about New York. And there's this kind of romanticization when you're an author and a poet, so yes, New York is captivating and all of this, all of the things, right? So when you apply for a Columbia University, was your Soar, your essay, was it finished? And was that part of your application? Do you send writing to them?
Yes.
And was that was part of it?
We do. So I sent them part of Soar, an excerpt from that, because it was interesting too, because I had finished Soar and I sent it off to all these writing contests and these literary magazines. It got rejected a bunch of times, but I sent it as part of my application, and, March rolled around, and so I applied to 6 schools in total because I was so scared I wasn't going to get into one. I got into all of them, which like, and every time one came through, I remember the first one came through, I just started crying. I was like, oh my God, this door is opening for me. Like
gratitude is so important.
Yes.
And so wait, so Columbia, and that was this the
Institute of American Indian Arts, the New School, CUNY, NYU, and UBC.
Oh my God. So how did you choose between Columbia and NYU?
Okay, so that one, actually, this was like another blessing. So NYU waitlisted me.
Okay.
They waitlisted me, and it was the best thing that ever happened, actually, because I thought I wanted NYU. But then when they waitlisted me, I kind of did more research, and their nonfiction program was still new, and it is still newer, so it wasn't as developed. But also, too, I'm the kind of person who really moves by instinct and intuition. And when I got the phone call from Columbia, it was a phone call, and it was from Wendy Walters, this amazing poet and writer, and one of my mentors who I love and respect so much. And it was a personal phone call, and she personally called me and was like, congratulations, like, you're accepted into Columbia. And I remember I was like cooking an egg in my kitchen at the time, and I answered it on my Apple Watch, and I was like, oh shit, like I gotta run. And like I ran into my office and like transferred it to my phone. I think I blacked out. She said all this stuff, and then she was like, so do you have any questions? I'm like, I think I need like a minute before I can coherently like form thoughts and ideas. And then I ran out into the living room, and I literally like, it was like a scene from a movie. I like dropped to all fours, like as if I was like a guitarist, like doing like the freaking slide, and just started sobbing. And in that moment, I was like, this is the school that I need to be at.
Yeah.
And also too, Wendy, like, she just really made me feel desired and wanted in that program. And she really fought for me and advocated for me to get like the maximum amount of scholarship and all of that stuff. And so that's when it was like, this, I don't care how I have to make it happen. I'm going to make this happen, because I could just feel that I needed to be there.
Yeah. And the universe creator was like, this is where, here you go, right?
Here's the door. It's open.
It's here. All of those years and you nursing and feeding your baby, Soar, and you created this essay and sent it out into the world, and everybody wanted you everywhere. And it's literally such a blessing to honor yourself and be honest with yourself that you needed to be alone, and you have to go through these heartbreaking moments with these men. You know, the part in the book that you talk about, and actually I'm just gonna look that up because it's so cinematic, and you literally do, this could be a movie.
Stay tuned. That's the goal.
Is it?
Because I love screenwriting, so it's always.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Yeah,
Then it needs to be. But when you have to break up with someone, because it just is not. And I thought
when you still love them but you know they're no longer healthy for you.
Yes, that is the most heart-wrenching and beautiful and poetic, and it's really you putting yourself first. And so many women do not do that. And we stay in relationships out of trauma bonding, you know, codependency and all of those things. So hearing you reading what you did, I'm just like, yes, girl. Yes, go. So you get into Colombia, and you, now at the time, is it still remote distance learning?
No, so it
had opened back up.
Yeah,
the world had opened.
Fall 2021, it was going to be open back up.
That's right. Yeah. And so you moved to New York.
Yes.
And did you know anybody here?
No, I had never even been to America before.
Stop.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. See, this is a true story. And I love how you have this fairy tale aesthetic, and you mentioned it a few times, and fairies, and it is because it is magic and it's magical, and you're living proof of that. And me too. Like, you know, we left our situations. I came here to New York City on a Greyhound bus in the year 2000 to do hair for models and celebrities, and that's what I'm doing. And now I'm doing, I don't know what I'm doing now, but this is another like fever dream. And I'm saying, like, I'm so insecure about how I speak, and my vocabulary is not, so hearing you say similar things about knowing well-read and, you know, all those things. But I still think it's important that our voices are heard no matter what.
Yeah,
right? Because
absolutely.
there are so many more people like us than the well-read people.
And we're all we all have imposter syndrome. All of us. Every single one. None of us know what we're doing, but we're just out here being like, hi.
Yeah, I like come to my little punk rock dive podcast studio. And you came because you're amazing. And so people keep coming, and I'm just doing it. And you have to start somewhere, and you started, you know, you're such an inspiration. And the movie screenplays, because every time when I was reading your book, it was so hard to put down because of the descriptiveness and the way you write. I can see it. I can just see it. So I'm so excited for that. I'm like so into it. I want to see more Indigenous women-led projects regardless.
Yes.
So this just got me like, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
It's going to totally happen.
There's a bunch of little projects I have in the works right now.
Oh my goodness. I'm obsessed. Okay. So you come to New York. And how was it coming into, first of all, you're coming to America, which, you know, is similar in aspects to Canada. And New York is its own beast, right?
Yeah.
So do you live in housing, like in Columbia's uptown? So how is that situation? Like you move, you leave, you know, your family behind, your friends, and you're alone. in New York. How was that?
It was like, I don't want to say it was easy, but it was interesting because I sold, I'd been living alone for so long. I moved out of home when I was just 17. And so I sold everything I owned, and I moved here with nothing but 2 suitcases, one full of clothes, one with my computer. I carried my computer because I have like a desktop. I literally had it strapped over my shoulder and then my monitor in the other luggage. And I like whatever. There's a whole other pocket into like how difficult it was, border and like blood quantum shit. It was insane.
Oh God.
Yeah, it was very difficult, and I was trapped in Montreal and for like 5 hours, and then I had to sleep there anyway before they let me into this country.
Did you drive?
No,
or you flew.
I flew.
Okay,
I flew.
Yeah, the Canadian Border Patrol, y'all are on one because anytime I've flown through or driven through Canada, it's always they do so much.
Yeah.
They're doing so much. Like and it's interesting. As Americans we're always kind of fed this this stereotype that Canadians are so nice and friendly, and the first time you meet a Canadian Border Patrol agent, that is gone. Because they are rough.
Yeah.
And it is insane. I was like, oh my, where am I going right now? So you managed to get across the border and you come to New York and you are alone. And I understand because it's like that freeing, that kind of weightlessness. You've sold everything off and you're here just with your baby, your computer, your words and your clothes. Yeah. So you're like, this is a new me.
Yeah. But it was kind of crazy because it was night. It was 10 p.m. and it was... it was 10 p.m. and I got an apartment in West Harlem.
Yeah.
So when
I first moved to New York, I lived in Harlem.
Yeah. So I was on like 140th and Broadway. And
oh my God.
Love that area.
149th. Yes,
oh shit, yeah.
149th and St. Nicholas Place.
Okay, nice.
So like a little further east, but I know exactly where you're at, which is gorge. Yeah,
love it. But it was
hectic,
very hectic, and it was like people on the streets blasting music, and I was like, "What have I gotten myself into?" I'm like, because growing up in Edmonton, we lived in the hood like many times, like when I was with my dad, and so typically when you see guys on the street, you cross the road, you try to, you know what I mean, like you try to like manage your interactions, whatever. But like the streets were packed with them, so I was like, what is all this? But then I just realized, no, this is just the culture. People don't have yards. This is just like what they do for fun, and like this is the vibe.
It's a culture shock.
Because
also you're coming, in, like you said, like this is their front yard. Like in New York, we don't. If you're lucky, you have a backyard, but most people do not. So the streets is, you sometimes are living, a big family in a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment. And, like we need space. You needed a whole room to yourself to write. Like sometimes we need that space. Yeah. And so, yes, we have to get outside to like get out of our little apartments that, our whole family is in. And, so yes, so you made it here. You had your initial run-in with the streets of New York. And then going to school, how was that experience starting off? Were there other Indigenous, Native, or Canadian people in your class? Like, did you have anyone to kind of like, where you're like, oh, hey, because you're like kind of a first, like, like for me, I've been on set since the year 2000, sometimes being the only fat brown person there for still. And so you're kind of like, okay, cool. Just like, I'm used to the whiteness, the white spaces. Yeah. So how was that for you, your experience in class?
Yeah. So no, mostly all of my classmates were white. I remember it was like the second semester, I heard whispers of 2 other Indigenous people. And I was like, well, who are they? Like, where are they? Like, what are their names? And so one is my friend Joel, who is a poet, and then I heard whispers of this girl Brody who was in fiction. So eventually I found them, we found each other, and like really kind of connected and bonded. But so there was one of us in each cohort, nonfiction, fiction, and poetry.
How long were you in school at Columbia?
2 years.
Okay, 2 years. So you have your essay Soar. now, at what point were you like, this is going to be a memoir. I'm releasing this book.
Yeah.
Did you have a professor? Was it you? Was it you and the professor deciding I'm doing this?
I knew it before I went into the program. So I was accepted into the program, and then I found out that Soar won first place in the Edna Stabler essay contest maybe like 3 months later. I forgot that I had even submitted it because I had been rejected like 4 times, and I'm already on. Now I'm just thinking about my MFA, la la la, moving through the world. Like, and then my friend texted me, she's like, "Oh my God, congrats. Like, we're both longlisted." I'm like, "For what?" I'm like, and then I was like, "Oh shit." And then I actually won it. Yes. But so I knew that it was going to be a memoir. And that's why I wanted to take the MFA. So I went in there being like, this is what it is. But the first semester, I remember I brought my essay Soar into my first workshop and had my classmates read it. And so they were kind of like, oh, wait, hang on. I want to slow down. What about this? What about your mom? What about this? And so that kind of first semester was really just like, oh, people are like really interested into like this area, or maybe something I didn't think about. They wanted to know, like, what are those beautiful moments, those tender moments, and blah, blah, blah. And so that's when it kind of just, like, cracked open for me, was truly that first semester where I was like, oh, no, I need to write into all of these spaces. See, just let it take me. Let it take me, just write them, and then eventually I will know how to weave it all together.
Okay, so it was, like, individual, their own stories that then you ended up weaving together.
Kind of. It was more like individual memories. So
okay.
That's how I approached the memoir. I would just think of a scene and a memory, and I would just try to write it and just describe it. And so I would do that again and again and again. And so I had made a list in the beginning of my MFA about these key significant moments. I'm like, I need to write these memories, and eventually I would cross them off the list. Write, cross, and then eventually I had like a document with like 95,000 words, and then I was like, okay,
this is a book. This is a memoir. Oh, I love it. So because you're in these predominantly like white PWI, predominantly white institutions, and surrounded by that, did you ever feel like you owed them, like, Ocean Vuong kind of talks about this too, about like being a like tourism for your white counterparts, as like, okay, this is like the Native American experience. Did you ever feel like you had any pressure to discuss that in your book, like how you wove in your Cree stories? Like the round dance, like the origin story of that. Did you feel like you had any responsibility to whiteness, to kind of educate readers in any way?
I want to say no, but there was a little bit. It was something that I thought about. So I never wrote this book for the white man or the white gaze or whatever, if you will. I wrote it for my family. I wrote it for our people. That was the core of it. But also too, I really recognized that I needed to include a little bit extra, because I wanted non-Indigenous folks to be able to understand, like a lot of our perspectives, because we inherently know our histories and we know these things, like we talk about them, but I knew that I needed to write a little bit into those things so the non-Indigenous person could understand a little bit more. But like I said, there was moments when classmates were like, oh, I want to know about this. I'm like, well, I'm not going to give you that. Yeah. And so there were a bunch of things that I kept sacred to me, and I protected, and I didn't go into all super specifics, or some of them were like, we need to know about Orlean's perspective more. And I'm like, I'm not going to give that to you. Like, that's her story.
And, reading the book too, you talk about to your mom and her memories, and Shayla, her memories. And I was almost dreading your older sisters.
Yeah.
Because of what we know. And I thought you handled it really beautifully, and precious and tender. And the part I love also, going back to your mom's interview of her memories and how you offered her comfort, you know, and solace, and like I'll be there with you to kind of mother you after you have this emotional, you know, exorcism of like, you know, saying these things. So I loved that, and I love the explanations that you did. You know, the round dance. I loved the origin story of the round dance. I wanted to ask you, would you read this page for me? I've highlighted it.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, this is one of the really long words. The long Cree words that is like hard to pronounce.
I know. Yes.
Some of them like I've like learned pretty well, but this one is Waskowagamupeyu, is when the water moves. And as babies, all we can do is exist in the body of water where we are conceived, merely float and swim before breaking the barrier and emerging on the other side. I met a woman on a balcony smoking a cigarette overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Shirahama, Japan. She told me that in China they have a word for the things we inherit while we are still in the womb, that protective embryonic sac of water cradling us before birth. She called it mu-fu. I looked the word up later, and mu translates to tent or curtain, and fu denotes home. What is a womb if not the original protective home we all have? Research has shown that our experiences in the womb influence our attachment styles and behaviors long after we're born. I often think of myself inside my mother when my father pressed a gun to her head and she begged for our lives. The intense fear my mother must have felt in that moment. Is it possible it seeped through and found its way into me, rendering in me a predisposition to anxiety before I was even born? Perhaps those experiences in the womb led to my innate intuition for danger. As children, we cannot control how or when the water moves. All we can do is drift and float in the tides until the day we leave them. And when that time comes, who will we be? Who will we have to reshape ourselves into?
Thank you. We talked a little bit about your intuition, and it coming from possibly this trauma that your mother was exposed to. You have done a lot of work on yourself, and that is through therapy, and you talk about EMDR. So a client of mine who's a therapist told me that that's what they did, and I didn't know what it was. I said, she's like, oh, they have these lights. I was like, oh, it's like in the Penguin when the woman comes back from the insane asylum and they have the red lights. Is that the light therapy? Is that the same one I'm thinking of? Or is that another one?
I don't know, because I haven't seen that movie,
Okay.
The Penguin.
It's like a series, but it's through light.
Yeah, so it is. You follow like a light.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, you did that. So I was like, I know what that is. Language, you know, I'm like, I figured this out. You got into therapy. Did your family also get into therapy in any ways? Did your mom or your sisters?
My mom has. Both of my sisters have not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my toxic trait is therapizing my loved ones. And it's so horrible and harmful. But, you know, obviously it's coming from a good place.
Yeah.
Because I've benefited from it. You can too. And you just want them to
reap the benefits of it.
Oh my God, right? And then you realize that you can't force them if they're not there yet, if they're not ready yet, right? That's just one of those heartbreaking things, like where, you know, it's working for me, it's not for them, and you just have to let it be.
Yeah.
Right? Did your family, have they read this book, and how do they feel about the book?
Yeah, they've read it. I think my mom has read it probably like 10 times now, like cover to end. Like she's probably read it almost as much as I have now. She loves it. Same with like my little sister. They're very, and Orlean, like very supportive. Orlean hasn't actually read the full thing because she's still battling her own mental health struggles right now. So but she's very supportive of it, and she knows like the parts of her that I included and everything like that. Everything about her like has her green stamp of approval, which was also really important to me.
Of course.
But, they're very proud of me, and they're very happy with like the way that how I carried our story. And
I love that. That was why I asked that question, because sometimes in families it's tricky, and you have two sisters. I grew up with a brother and a half brother, a brother that I grew up with in my household. So I loved hearing the sweetness of sisters and the meanie bitchiness that sisters, and all the estrogen and all the women, it's like, oh my God. Like,
Drama,
I'm
chaos.
kind of glad I've like had this brother moment happening.
Yes.
Like, so they're supportive of it.
Yeah, deeply so. And it's like really kind of kickstarting those deeper levels of healing, like for them as well.
Yes.
Because I've been in it for years and working through it.
I'm healed while reading it too. Like, seriously,
Wow.
it is a healing book that kind of makes you open your heart to those vulnerable moments that have happened in your life, and you've just put it out here. You're just fucking cut yourself open and
unapologetically,
let it out.
like, here it is.
And it's so freeing, and so inspirational. So yes, it's that good. Like,
that was my goal. That's the mission of it.
And I know this has just come out to the world, to the public, and it's going to be read by so many people. And I know it's already charting on lists. I cannot emphasize enough for people to read your book, because it does have like this beautiful hope of how you got out of this crazy situation, your life, and wrote about it, and now you're going to be a New York Times bestseller. You're going to have a movie. You're going to have all these things, and I think it's important, especially for us, for our people, to see this happening.
Yeah,
and it's magic. It is magic. So I also loved in the book you were talking about the prison project. Can you talk a little bit more about your work there? And I just called it Prison Project, but what's the actual name?
That is, so it's the University of Alberta Prison Project.
Yes.
And I met the lead investigator for that, Sandra Bucerius, in 2019 when I was doing a semester abroad in Italy. And I took this class that was like a comparison of the prison system in Italy versus Canada. And that's how I met her. And
well, actually, pause. Are the prisons in Canada as horrible they are in America? Is it similar?
Like, I mean, they're all different. Federal is better than provincial, then is better than remand. So, you can't look at them like they're all like, lump them in like that, but they're not good here. Like, there's more programming available. In some prisons, there's more programming available for Indigenous people in some, and then not in others. So, it's a mixed bag for sure. But what is more important, I think, to look at and to focus on is like the recidivism levels, like the reoffending. And, we have very high recidivism rates here in Canada. And, a lot of our institutions are not they're designed with punishment in mind instead of healing.
And it's the same in America. Okay, that's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
So it's the same.
Yeah.
And instead of the healing part of it, they're not trying to, help this poor person who probably was sexually abused as a child, physically abused as a child, and then, they get in trouble because of trauma, escapism, numbing. So it is similar. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to ask you
to
about
clarify.
that.
Yeah. And so, like I said, there's movement and there's change, but it happens on a very slow level because there's a lot of red tape and stuff to bypass.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
Like America,
Yes.
the prison industrial complex is such a lucrative situation.
Exactly.
And the prisons, like where I live, upstate New York, there's prisons all around us, and those communities benefit from people being jailed, from the DA putting people away, the judge that they vote in. You know, we're flipping it from red to blue because there's so many people that left the city and moved up there during COVID. But it's a money-making machine that serves to mostly incarcerate brown and black people. And they make money from that. And so anyway, go ahead.
Sorry. So the Prison Project is like this organization that I joined in 2019, and they're run out of the University of Alberta, and you know, basically it started as like this research initiative where they would go into prisons and they would talk to inmates about their life experiences, both in prison, before prison, and then if they were going to get out, like what their plans were for after. So it was gathering all this like data and research, and basically what the findings came back with were that, like, I think in the men's institution, 95% of them were physically and or sexually assaulted from like before they were like 8 years old. Like some of those are their first memories. And they suspect the number is actually more like 100%, but men are, because it's 100% in women's, but most likely men are more likely to cover up and not admit that stuff. And because of their research and findings, actually, they were able to implement what different like trauma-informed programming. I think it was in the remand level in Alberta, which was huge. And so now there's like lots of training being done about being educated about Indigenous people's experiences, and so police officers and people like that can use that as a tool and a lens to hopefully allow them to have more compassion and understanding. In the treatment of our peoples within those institutions. But so part of that research project, I would transcribe audio recorded interviews of their stories. And so I would sit there and I would listen to these stories. And I remember I was listening to men's stories who were housed in the same institution that my father was incarcerated for molesting my older sister. And this is a known Skinner's prison. So Skinner's is a term for people who sexually assault. And so there I was now, like, I think I was like, 25 years old or something like that, listening to those stories and typing them up. And there was many moments that I have to take out my headphones and I would cry, like, because the stories that these people told are so horrific. Like, you know, their parents.
God. You're
like,
listening to all of this?
All of those. I'm listening to all of those, and I'm typing it, and you know, I definitely had the capacity to do that, but all of these men were sexual offenders, just like my father. They were in the same jail that he was in, like just different times. And so in listening to their stories, it was kind of like I was listening to part of my father's story and understanding their histories of trauma, you know, which then perpetuated those cycles of abuse and allowed them to continue on like that. I was healing a deeper part of myself that I didn't even know that I had to heal. I didn't even know that was left because I had told myself, you know, yeah, I forgive my father. Like, I forgive him for me, right? So I can move on, whatever. But it wasn't until I really had that experience with the UAPP where I actually released that anger that was still there.
Yeah.
That was still there, like at the root of it. And I think that was, other than writing the book, that was probably the most healing, cathartic experience I've had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reading that part, I knew what was going to happen because you then, just like these officers out on the street, are going to read and have some kind of empathy and compassion for these Skinners, which I've never heard that term. And ultimately, you saw through his eyes, like you felt maybe that trauma that you understood it. And
Yeah.
so you were fully able to really let it go.
Yeah.
And I love that you put that. And it was just, again, I go back to that Ocean Vuong quote because, again, it's a circle.
Circling back to it.
You
with
just
like,
went back around.
Yeah.
And I think after reading that and going back, it was just like, oh, it just all fits together so well. And your book is incredible, and I know you have to go. And I thank you so much for releasing Soft as Bones. Everyone, I will put links to this, but you will hear about this. You will know about this. Thank you for coming on my little podcast.
Oh my God, it's an honor.
It's an honor for me, and I hope you come back when the movie comes out.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And where else can people find you? I know there's Instagram. Can you tell us your social media and where else? What's coming up next for you?
Yeah, definitely. So Soft as Bones, it's my book, but it's this philosophy and this quote that has been with me much longer than it was the title of this book. So my Instagram is at Soft as Bones. I also make YouTube videos as well. So that's also Soft as Bones. And then actually in terms of like what's next and what's kind of on the moves right now, I actually just started my own not-for-profit, and so it's called the Soft as Bones Storytelling Foundation, and I'm going to be releasing it probably at the end of this week or next week, and very exciting, but basically, some of my experiences that I've had in navigating the literary world, I basically just realized that there was this gap that we needed an all-Indigenous, literary festival, and so... It's the Soft as Bones Storytelling Foundation is going to host this festival called Woven Skies Storytelling Festival. And so it's going to be a place where we have Indigenous authors, dancers, musicians, all different forms of storytelling come up there, and we'll have panels, empowerment panels. There will be workshops, lots of really fun, exciting things happening. So that festival will happen in 2026. And then I'll also have a creative retreat paired with it for one for youth and one for adults. And then my most favorite thing is we will also be giving out a $10,000 scholarship to an Indigenous student studying in any program of their choice anywhere in the world, because when I was leaving Canada to come and study, all of our band funding, all of our Indigenous funding, even scholarships, they all have this stipulation that you have to stay within Canada and it has to be at a Canadian institution. And for me, getting accepted into Columbia, there's a lot of financial barriers that our people face, to make it happen. I am still in debt from school, from different loans and things I had to do to make it work. But so it has always been a dream of mine for a number of years now to have a scholarship that can help alleviate that burden. So the Soft as Bones Storytelling Foundation is going to be getting launched right away, and I'm really, really excited to kind of put my heart and soul into that and create these safe spaces for Indigenous creatives to be celebrated and honored, and invite other people to bear witness to that.
Yes, to our greatness. That is why I'm doing this podcast. I'm amplifying you and our community because we are so amazing. We can do anything, and we are doing everything. Yeah. And I'm so inspired. Now, you're at Joe's Pub tomorrow, and this will come out after that. But what are you doing at Joe's Pub tomorrow? Yeah,
so Joe's Pub, I was invited to give a talk, so it's going to be... It'll be a little more out of my comfort zone because I'm used to reading from my book. Yeah. And every time I've given a speech, I have a speech to read. But so this, I'm just telling a story, and it'll be a 12-minute long exploration in their theme called Either Or. So once a month they do this, and they invite different authors and speakers to come and do this. I don't even know how they found me. I'm how do you guys even know who I am? I'm in my mind, I'm I'm just little old me.
No, you're not. You're so much more. So that's tomorrow.
That's tomorrow. So I'm gonna.
And is it fiction, nonfiction?
It's
or
real.
It can be anything.
It's real. So you can explore the theme however you want. So basically, I'm just gonna kind of tell this story of, for a long time I felt like, because the theme is either or. So for a long time, I felt like I either had to love my father or I had to hate him. So I'm going to talk about that and then kind of break that down to really show how the only thing I could have done was embrace the love and the anger at the same time, and to hold space for that. And that's kind of going to be what the talk is about.
Oh, wow. You are a great literary greatness is happening here. And oh my goodness, we are so blessed to have you. Thank you for this. It is a gift to all. I can't recommend it enough. I will be giving it out as gifts for anyone, for everyone. If you want one, let me know. I will send you one because it is that important of a read. Chyana, thank you so much.
Amy, thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
See you soon, cousins.
See you.